Hey there, everyone. It's kind of funny. I guess I'm making another video really fast. I'm just throwing some stock footage up. It's not like important or anything. No VTuber today, sorry. But I wanted to make a clarification actually on this post because I had to edit it. Someone was concerned I was trying to say for people to get off their meds. No, to be clear, to be abundantly clear, I would never tell you to get off your meds, and I tried to discourage people from getting off of their meds. My sentiment was more to say that, I was able to get off of my meds, and this was a big part of the motivation of why I decided to get off of my meds. And watching it and seeing how it's impacting people who can't make that choice and can't do that is devastating, because a lot of those people are my friends. And it's really hard to talk about this because the discussion about not taking your meds is so fucking loaded, especially by people who don't have to take meds, who don't have to have this discussion. And it's a discussion about very sensitive issues like bodily autonomy and our relationship with medicine and our relationship with understanding our own perception of existence even. And I think it's worth talking about, I think it's worth, explaining my feelings on it, because the thing is that, I did stop taking my meds about last year, and I've actually been able to manage decently well, all things considering. And to stress, that doesn't mean that I don't have, a pretty moderate or severe case or whatever. It's not so severe that I can't manage myself. I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm able to get off my meds. But it's also not a trivial problem. It's actually something that's caused me a lot of, struggle, and it's something that I've had to, it's been life-changing for me. And it's really hard to talk about just because the discourse is so loaded. People assume that you're saying one thing or another. And I think after this interaction that I had with this person, I thought it would be a good idea to just kind of open a discussion about, my experience with stopping to take my meds, right? So, first off, I believe that, the fundamental aspect of my own personal politics on the discourse of taking medication is really what do you believe is best for yourself, right? And I think that what's important about that question is that I think that the subject of you should really be the center of that discourse, right? And the thing is that, it should be not about some sort of abstract ideology about being free or even being separated from the pharmaceutical apparatus, right? But rather one of what's actually best for you to continue living a good life. And in most people's situations, the answer is very clear. That's just to continue taking your medication because there's no interruptions to your medication. They are effective. You have a positive relationship with your doctor, and you're being treated, and you feel comfortable with what you're getting. And if you're in that situation, then that's a good thing. And if you're not in that situation and you're uncomfortable, maybe, there are ways to improve that don't involve, getting off your medication, right? The problem was that, because of both a series of circumstances and personal decisions that I made, I didn't find myself necessarily aligning with that particular, approach. And that's the reason, and I really stress this, seriously, because part of what I really despise about a lot of discussions surrounding, bodily autonomy and psychiatry is that we aren't, we as psychotic people are not really, permitted to have, a real adequate discourse about our autonomy, right? It's really dominated either by, repeating what, Western medicine has researched and produced, right? And that's I'm not saying that Western medicine is wrong or that it's not valuable. It's incredibly valuable. But what I'm also saying is that, it doesn't cover everything. It doesn't, for example, Western medicine doesn't have a description of like what I experienced when I was psychotic. It doesn't have like a narrative understanding of the elements that I experienced. I mean, you can't just open a research paper and understand that, right? And that's kind of part of the problem. Like, you have that aspect of it. It's effective for treating certain aspects of it, but also it doesn't understand the like inner world lived experience. But then there's also these other people who are concerned about the relationships to power that has, right? The relationships of power that these psychiatrists may have, because a lot of these, you got to remember, this is the same field that has things like conversion therapies for homosexuals and shit like that. So there's a real question always about bodily autonomy. Minorities and political adversaries have always historically had relations with, negative relations with the mental health system because of how they were used as an apparatus to oppress them, right? So, there is absolutely a biopolitics that's surrounding the question of this situation, right? And I think that I think that this discourse needs to take that very seriously, right? And the problem is that when we talk about the question of bodily autonomy and taking meds, like most of the discourse is overcoded by these viewpoints, and I feel that it's important for somebody like me who I feel like made a very educated decision to do this, and a very personal decision, and you'll find through this video why my decision to do this is not something that most people should do, and why I feel that there is an exception, and why I made these decisions the way I did. And I think it would provide a lot of insight as well to why people feel inclined to do these things, and perhaps even improve gaps in treatment for other people. And even though I choose to live my life like this, I think it could even help a lot of people who choose to live their life on medication, or have a particular relationship with their doctor, because it can reframe their understanding with their relationship with their doctor, right? So there's a lot of reasons why I decided to quit my medication, and it's not something that came to me apparently when I came to the decision to do to do that, right? Now, at this time, I had already been stockpiling my medication, and so what I would do to stockpile my medication was I was in a situation where I could double my dose, right? And I would ask the psychiatrist to double my dose because I was having voices or whatever. And then what I would do is I would cut the pills in half with a pill cutter, right? And even if you have the pills that have the powder inside of them, you can just use you can just measure it out, right? You can still split it in half and then make your own, right? And pill capsules are pretty cheap online. But yeah, so this is how I would stockpile medication. And what I would do is that if I was having an episode, then that way, if I was having an episode, I could literally just double my dose immediately, right? And just take the prescribed dose, and then still have a stockpile of medication if something happened. And I have been concerned for years now about issues with supply and access to medication. Because one, I witnessed the supply issues surrounding Adderall, and what impact that had for people with ADHD and everything like that, and that was pretty horrific. And the thing is that it's the gap between just stopping taking your meds for antipsychotics. You don't feel it right away necessarily, but it just if you have an episode, it just goes. It's hard to stop, right? That's why they want you to take antipsychotics, because they take a while to kick in, and it can take a while to stop the episode, right? So basically, I was concerned about my ability to access a consistent supply of medication, because I was working at a pretty well-off job at the time, right? And I was receiving health insurance that was really shitty and expensive, but I made enough money where I could pay for everything out of pocket. It wasn't that, or not out of pocket, but like with the insurance, and paying for everything, with my paycheck, and not feel, like I was uncomfortable financially or anything, right? But the problem was that job was, I did not like working at that job, right? And I didn't like the work environment that I was in, and I felt very trapped in that job because the economy was not very good at this time for tech jobs specifically. Like, I don't know how other sectors were impacted, but the tech job market got really screwed over after Elon Musk fired all those guys. I've talked about this before on my channel. But yeah, so basically I couldn't just go find another job. So if I had to quit or I was fired or anything happened, I would lose access to my health care. And and that was the reason why I was stockpiling. And it is a very serious, scary situation. I think, like, a lot of I think there needs to be a lot more discussion from, like, working disabled people who have to deal with similar issues like this, because, like, this is part of what motivates the decision for people to find alternatives, and find, like, different ways of dealing with their stuff, right? And so number two, right, the number two reason was, this kind of leads into my relationship with my job, which was that the reason why I had to stay at that job was because I was on that medication. So it was kind of like a catch-22. If I quit the job, right, I can't get my meds anymore, and then I go crazy, and then I can't go get a job again, right? Or and the job was just, like, making me feel horrible. It was even triggering my episodes, in my opinion, but if I stay there, I feel miserable. It's making my condition get worse. I was, progressively getting worse every year I was there. I had to get hospitalized again, and it was just a nightmare. And I realized I was stuck there because of my relationship to the American health system, right? And because of that, that was a very big motivation. And the thing is, I want people who are on their medication to understand that this is not me saying you should get off your meds because you'll be free of, like, your employer or whatever. This is me saying that this is the power that your employer asserts over you, and you should be aware of what impact it has, because when you actually find yourself in the situation where they could take that away from you, it's genuinely terrifying. And the third reason why is because I was having, really, I realize now that I had really subpar treatment in general. Like, the second time I went to the hospital, they didn't even give me meds for 48 hours. I was, like, tripping the fuck out, and they didn't even give me meds. And the thing is, it takes several days for it to kick in, and I was only there for 6 days. I was in and out like a revolving door. And then I got the bill, and before insurance it was $10K, and then after insurance it was about $1K. And then there was the ambulance bill. That's what I'm trying to remember. And yeah, and it's just like, it's expensive, and working there was expensive for me because I kept having, like, these relapse episodes. Sorry, I completely forgot what I was saying. That's kind of what happens to my brain now. And the worst part is that, like, this still happens when I'm on medication. Like, medication doesn't, like, fix you, right? It doesn't, like, make everything better. It just stops, like, the cycle of, like, psychosis. And, like, I think people should have a lot more respect for people who have to take these medications, because it's not that the medications are even that hard to live with. I think that antidepressants I had a much bigger problem with, but rather that it doesn't make you, like, not have the consequences of having experienced psychosis. You still have the memory loss, you still have the confusion, you still have all of those things. It's just you're not having, like, the full episodes and shit. And, like, for me, I could still feel in my head, like, what was trying to trigger the hallucination. I just wouldn't feel it actually happening. And, like, the system that did that just would break down and it just stopped working. And I asked them to change the med and they disappeared on me. Like, they straight up, I tried to schedule an appointment with this person, and apparently they went on leave, and there was all this shit. They wouldn't transfer me to another psychiatrist. Like, the therapist tried to set me up, the caseworker tried to set me up, and they couldn't get through. Nobody could get anything done. It was a Kafkaesque nightmare. And I was running out of meds. Like, I had, like, 2 months of meds left. I had stockpiled enough for, to deal with a situation like this, but I had not, it was going on longer than anyone would have anticipated. And, that's the thing, it was a hard decision because I knew that taking those meds were a big reason why I was able to even keep working at that job, but, I also realized that it was what was trapping me there at that job, and I realized that I wasn't getting the treatment that I needed, and it was going to take too long to find somebody new, and I just made that decision, and, it was also a very personal decision, and it was something that I was met with existentially, when I faced these issues, because, I kept having breakout episodes every summer, regardless of, the medication dosage and everything, and how I was being treated and everything. It would just always happen. By August, I would start having these episodes. And I realized some very important, like, information about, like, how these episodes were working in my experience, right? Because I think that, psychosis is a very personal experience. I think that, like, part of what makes it very hard to, like, live with is that it's the way that it separates you from the world around you is not something that's necessarily generalized. What you actually experience is something that is, like, warped and fucked up because of your own experiences, and you have to work your way through trying to even understand what any of it is. It's really hard. And what I realized through my experiences is that, like, what I really was having a hard time with coping with being on antipsychotics was, and the thing is that I did not have, like, I had the weight gain, and that was something I was a bit concerned about, but not nearly as much as just, like, I felt like something was missing about myself, right? And I don't feel like most people who take antipsychotics feel this way, just because, like, they have a different relationship with their relationship with existence. And I think this might be part of the reason why I am somewhat treatment resistant. But it's because, like, it's because, like, I felt like disconnected from myself. I didn't feel whole when I was taking those meds, because I felt like, and I think that's part of the reason why I could feel in my head, like, the internal apparatuses that were trying to make me see and hear shit. It's weird because I lived with that shit pretty much my whole life, and looking back, I realized, oh, that's not normal. Most people don't experience those things. Okay, all right, like, as a kid, I'd hear all the scolding voices and shit, and it's just like, and then, I had visual dream-like hallucinations and stuff sometimes, but, like, I didn't realize that wasn't normal, especially getting older, and, it's just something that, to me, is like, it's hard for me to adapt to being a normal person. I never was a normal person, and, some people, I see them and I can see how they fit very cleanly into the structures of this or that society, and they really do need a kind of support that functions through this clinical model. And I think that those people also need the resources that they need to be able to accomplish those things. But I also think there needs to be a discourse and an honestness and an openness to the experiences of people who don't fit into those categories, people who are like me, who are labeled as treatment resistant and are stereotyped into this like unfair representation of somebody who's just trying to, you know, hurt other people or be suicidally stupid, or, you know, not contemplating the consequences of their decisions. And that to me is ridiculous, because this was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make in my life, even though I didn't necessarily understand every reason why I took it when I did. And like the viewpoint that I had after experiencing psychosis is that, you know, really the world that I wanted to explore, you know, I'm somebody who's kind of like an explorer at heart. Like, I like to reach out and find out what's in the world. And the thing is that I saw this as an opportunity in myself to use my own experiences and my body to actually embrace and, you know, experience these things, because I was stable enough where I was through these kind of like self-reflective periods, and quite frankly just luck. Like, I need to emphasize how much of this is just luck. Like, there's a reason why a lot of people can't do this. It's because they didn't get lucky. They weren't able to, you know, assemble something that allows them to even find a balance again. That's kind of the problem. When you get knocked over like that, most people are just gonna fall over. And I got lucky. I was able to get back up, you know, and that doesn't mean that my condition is less significant necessarily. In some cases, I'm sure, but like, that doesn't mean that I'm not as significantly disabled or anything like that, or that I have it easy or anything. But the way that I deal with it is that I see myself as kind of like somebody who's doing almost like a extreme sport, almost like, but within the mind as opposed to the body. Because, and I mean, it is part of the body, but it's a different kind of extreme sport, you know. And there's a joy that I have in being able to, you know, be able to accomplish these things, you know. And I don't think people should feel bad or feel like there's something lesser about them because they can't necessarily find themselves in the position to be able to climb a mountain. So why should we feel that way for somebody who's able to make things work just out of sheer whatever with, you know, mental illness? I think that we can learn a lot from my experiences, and I think that there's a lot of value to learn about that. You know, we learned a lot from climbing mountains and diving in the depths of the ocean to learn about how our bodies work and how, you know, gases work and physics, and we discovered a lot about the world through these explorations. And, you know, if I find myself in that position, you know, maybe life isn't about just living as long as you want, you know. It maybe part of it is about exploring things that, you know, other people have never touched before, and sharing what experiences that you've had with that. And I think that, you know, after hearing this, I think that people who do take, you know, antipsychotics can really appreciate now that this is not really a discussion that's about you need to take your meds or you don't need to take your meds, but rather, you know, one of bodily autonomy and the very relationship with our own existence. You know, the real problem that I have with the discussion is not that, you know, people are taking meds. It's the fact that, you know, I shouldn't be in a situation where, you know, I shouldn't be in a situation where when I go to the hospital, I'm at risk of being, you know, sent to a mental ward involuntarily just because I tell them that I'm not on my medication, right? And they don't like me or think I'm lippy, right? I shouldn't have to be at risk of that, right? Especially if I'm a well-spoken individual who is clearly communicating in a way that is not psychotic, right? Like, I shouldn't have to be in that situation. No psychotic person shouldn't have to be in that situation, right? And just telling me that I should just be on my meds doesn't solve that fucking problem, right? Because that's a problem that impacts everybody who is on the spectrum of psychosis. Everybody has to deal with the consequences of how we're treated in the healthcare apparatus. And like, I think that we just need to and I think, and this kind of ties into what like institutional psychotherapy and Laborde was trying to do with its psychiatry, where it was trying to horizontalize the relationship that we have with doctors. It's not that, Western psychiatry has nothing to offer. It's that it asserts an extreme power over our lives in such a way because it has been able to produce some very powerful and useful techniques for treatment. But I think anybody who has found success within treatment for any of their psychosis has to recognize that a lot of that also comes within ourselves. If you were involved in any therapy or psychoanalysis, I mean, I think your therapist or psychoanalyst would agree with that, because it's pretty much necessary in order to make progress in therapy. And I think that the developments that people make in regards to their self-developments in that setting shouldn't be seen as something that the therapist had led them to, but a development on their own terms. And I have found that cool therapists, cool people in psychiatry generally respect my opinion on my decision to not take medication. So at the end of the day, what I'm really getting at is, one, if you feel comfortable with yourself, don't stop taking your meds. If you don't feel comfortable with yourself, don't stop taking your meds. Have a conversation with your psychiatrist and your therapist. If you really find yourself at the edge of making that decision, you have to recognize that you live with psychosis. Like, you have to accept that. You have to accept that you need social support. You have to accept that, you are just dealing with the side effects of this illness much more heavily than other people. You have to accept that there's a possibility that you could trigger an episode that causes you to not recover. You have to accept that you're playing with fire. Just like how when you climb a mountain, you have to accept that you could fall 3,000 feet to your death off of a glacier. That's how we have to treat it. That's how we have to see it. It's not a game of independence. It's not some kind of fucking libertarian, initiative. It's our bodies. And it's our relationship that is fundamental to our existence.